5 Live Boxing.
Welcome to a special heavyweight 5 Live Boxing edition. It's a World Heavyweight Championship fight on Saturday night inside Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. 60,000 people will be there to watch Tyson Fury defending his WBC belt against Derek Chisora. Okay, they're friends, but guess what? They could also be rivals. They're good pals, but they could also be enemies. We'll find out tomorrow exactly what does happen. The bookies favour one man. The fans, well, 60,000 of them are coming out in the freezing cold to watch him, and that's the capacity that was allowed. It's the Tyson Fury business, the boxing business. Trust me. I'm going to be talking to Frampton, former two-weight world champion, and Richie Woodall, bronze medalist in 1988 at the Seoul Olympics and a former WBC super middleweight champion. Then we'll catch hold of David Haye, a cruiserweight and a heavyweight, and a man who was once very close to fighting Tyson Fury. It's a special heavyweight bonus edition. It's 5 Live Boxing, and my name is Steve Bunce. So 10 minutes ago, Tyson Fury was on the stage and Derek Chisora on the stage making weight. Well, they don't have to make weight, they're heavyweights, doing what they like. We're in Islington in the design centre. The crowd's thinned out now. There were maybe 1,000, maybe 600 or 700. They've filed out on the streets. It's early evening. It's a big evening. Fury's left. He sung a bit of a song. And Derek Delboy Chisora's left. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the fight. But first of all, David Haye's here somewhere, so we've got to keep our voices down so we don't upset him. But I'm going to ask you, Carl, first of all, about the handshake and what side you're on. David Haye is saying that about this handshake that the boxers have had, that Derek Delboy Chisora and Tyson Fury have agreed to stand toe-to-toe in the first round. Tyson's going to give up all of his advantages and to entertain the crowd. Where do you stand on this fantastic, fun idea?
I think they might do it. I'm kind of leaning towards thinking that they probably will do it. Wouldn't surprise me if Fury moves around a little bit and you're going to have Sugar Hill in his ear before he goes out saying, please don't do that. There's no need for it.
There's a time and a place.
Yeah, there's a time and a place. But I think that I have a feeling they're going to stand and have a fight at the start. Whether that lasts into the second round, third round, who knows?
Richie, what about you? Come on, Rich.
I think
you're a consummate boxer. What about you?
I think it's got to happen for the excitement, because if not, it's going to be, I think, a very boring one-sided fight. And the reason why I think it's going to happen, I think Tyson Fury is looking at this fight and looking at victory in a different way, because Carl will probably agree with me. The ultimate victory, I've always thought, to get over your opponent is to beat him at what he does best. Yeah. And we know that Chisora is a power man. He likes to stand and trade, short to mid-range, and blast it out. And I think Tyson Fury says, well, okay, I can beat you at that as well, and he'll do that.
I agree, but it's daft, isn't it? Like,
crazy.
Like if you can move around and box ahead of someone easy, why would you give him a chance?
But Carl, he's done it twice before.
I know.
What's dafter? Close your eyes and think. What's dafter? When we went out to Las Vegas for the second fight with Wilder, and he told us, and John Fury had told us, he said he's going to go at Wilder from the first round. He's going to stop him in about 6 or 7. He's going to drop him with body shots and head shots. Okay, he said that. We looked at each other when we were around that round table going, yeah, of course he is, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And what did he do? He did exactly that. What's after? Doing that or going toe-to-toe with Chisora? There we go. What's
and he won that fight. I thought it was a massive bluff, and he proved everyone wrong. I think most people in the world thought there's no way he's going to stand in front of Wilder and have this fight, and that's what he done in the second fight. And that's what he done in the third fight.
It's a massive risk, Steve. It was a massive risk against Deontay Wilder. And again, it's a big risk against Derek Chisora, because you're giving him the only chance of victory for him. He's not going to outbox Tyson Fury at long range behind his jab. He's got to get his head on his chest and whack away. But what he needs there, he needs the sparring partner. He needs the dance partner. He needs someone who's going to hold his feet and say, well, come on then, let's do it.
Now, Derek's had problems in the 2 fights they had, the British title fight back in 2011 and the British title fight in 2014. Derek had problem closing the gap, getting close. And in fact, I was reminded, watching some of the clips when we were doing the show, Carl, here at the Design Centre, of Derek following Tyson around. I mean, literally following him. And I'll put it to you, even though he's now 38 years of age and he's had those 12 losses and he's had a long old career, I put it to you, he's a better fighter now. And I'm not suggesting he can win it from distance. Of course he can't. I'm not being stupid. But I'm suggesting he might be able to somehow get a bit closer without having to go toe-to-toe. I mean, there's a slight question mark above that. I'm throwing it to you.
I get that, but there's a couple of different things going to happen here. Like Fury, I don't think Fury can move like he used to move. I think he maybe...
Now, that's a great point.
So I think he has to stand at some point, and whether he does that at the start, like he said, or he does it further down the line in the middle rounds or whatever, who knows? But I think that looking at that second fight that Chisora and Fury had, it looked like Derek, he hadn't prepared for a southpaw.
He moaned about the eye, he moaned about everything.
He felt sorry for himself and everything else, but he will be prepared for southpaw Fury, he'll be prepared for orthodox, he'll be prepared for a mover, he'll be prepared for a guy that's going to stand and fight him. I think it's going to be a better fight than the previous two.
I do think, though, Carl, at the same time, if Tyson Fury decides to box as a southpaw again, I think that's going to be an absolute nightmare for Derek Chisora. That's because he can make so much advantage of his height and reach. He hits, if he jabs and steps back and maintains a gap, it's a nightmare scenario
so frustrating, isn't it?
For Derek Chisora, because he cannot literally, Steve, close that gap without getting caught, because there's always an increase in distance between the rear hand of an orthodox boxer, especially when he's trying to throw the shot against a southpaw, and if that southpaw's leaning back, which that's what Tyson Fury did in that second fight, he just couldn't get to him.
And of course, we should add that as good as Derek, I think Derek's improved since then, so has Fury improved since then. Yeah. Something just occurred to me, this is fluid, I don't pre-arrange my questions, as you two know. Something just occurred to me, I'm wondering, when Andy Lee, who will not be involved with this fight, and Sugar Hill got together with Tyson, I wonder if they saw something in Tyson's slowly declining mobility. And I'm wondering if part of the change in the way he fought against Wilder, that was obviously the way to beat Wilder, we know now, but I'm wondering if they also saw a man that couldn't dance. Because he didn't dance. That's interesting. I never thought about that before, because he didn't dance for 12 rounds against Wilder when he was still a dancer.
I've thought about that.
You've done it, Carl. You nailed it, son.
I think that
you've got the job, son.
That's part of the reason why he's changed this. You can't... Look at the size of him. He's a monstrous man. He's got, the flipping belly hangs over his shorts. He can't get up on his toes anymore. His knees have got to be banjaxed and his ankles and everything else. I just think he can't do what he used to do. And because of that, he has to stand and fight, but he's very good at that as well.
But having said that, he tends to do the opposite to what most people are thinking he's going to do. That's the thing, Steve. He always tends to do the opposite. If you think he's going to stand and trade, he gets up on his toes. If you think he's going to hit and he's going to run, he stands and trade. He's a phenomenal fighter for a 19-stone man. Yeah. He's the most agile 19-stoner I've ever seen.
It doesn't make sense.
He might be agile for 19 stone. I'm starting to see this differently now. He might be agile for 19 stone too, and he might be an agile fighter, but he's also 34 years of age. He's also got a lot of years. He's also had a lot of injuries. And Derek is, I tell you what Derek's really good at, making you work constantly by pushing you back. I mean, he wore Usyk out for 4 rounds.
Yeah.
Usyk had, listen, Usyk was always going to win, but he had to take a deep breath, Usyk, and find his pace. Once he found his rhythm and his timing, he was leaving Derek standing. But Derek makes you work. And not necessarily by throwing punches. Derek makes you work to get into position.
And throughout the fight as well. Derek's one of these guys where, and most fights that you look at him, it looks like he's blown at the end of round 2. Yeah. And he just continues to plow on and plow on and plow on. And that's his style. And it's got to be, you got to be fight. I imagine an opponent of Derek Chisora thinking, this guy's blowing here at the end of round 2 or round 3 already. I'm going to get rid soon. It's the exact same fighter in round 12. He doesn't change. He just fights on heart and instinct.
Let's look a little bit at the fight. I can't remember a man in the world's top 10. You have to put Derek, I think, in the world's top 10, who's had 12 defeats in his career. Yeah. Even going back to some people talking about the golden days of the 50s or the 70s. Ken Norton had 4 or 5. Ali had a couple. Even Jimmy Ellis had probably only had 6 or 7. 12 defeats, and there's no way in my opinion you edge him out of that top 10. Let's do a little bit of a Derek Loving. He's a remarkable fighter. It's been 10 years, over 10 years. The Helenius fight was before the Klitschko fight. It's been about 12 years of solid championship fights from the big lad.
Unbelievable. It's been 8 years since he obviously fought Tyson before, and in that time he's had around about 18 to 20 contests, and he's lost a few of them. But he's all
good fighters, though.
Yeah, to good fighters. I mean, look at the Dillian White fights. They were absolutely classics. The first one toe to toe. Well, they both were, wasn't they? Yeah. and it was very, very close in the first one when he got beat on the split.
Yeah.
And then the second one, he got stopped, but he was winning the fight. I mean, incredible. The Parker fights, and then Kubrat Pulev in the second fight. Obviously, he beat Pulev in his last contest. I think he's an improved fighter since the last time he fought Tyson Fury, because of the experience.
Richie, Carl and I would like to talk to you about the first Chisora fight against White. But unfortunately, there was an absolute disaster that night. They stuck that up against you. Do you remember?
Yeah,
that was the most ridiculous. So what?
We're going to blame Eddie Hearn on
and
that
the great irony of that is that Derek Chisora and Dillian White were in one of the all-time great domestic heavyweight fights. But guess what? It wasn't the best fight on the night, because that happened in Manchester with him. I'm going to remind you again, the Josh Wellington fight. How mad is that? We had two unbelievable fights. Yeah. With Tyson, listen, we were doing the BT show, Paul Dempsey, and Dempsey said, is there any danger, he asked all three, is there any danger of Tyson looking past Derek Chisora and looking at Usyk at ringside, looking at Joe Joyce at ringside? I'm going to ask you, is there anything in him that suggests to you that could happen, or is it just that they're heavyweight so anything could happen?
Steve, I think Derek Chisora will be hoping and praying in that situation that he is looking past him and he's looking at a Usyk fight, because, again, if you're complacent against Derek Chisora, that increases Derek Chisora's chances of victory. So if Tyson has taken his eye off the ball here, looking at Alexander Usyk and thinking of that fight, or even an AJ fight further down the line, that could be a big mistake. But that's what Chisora will be praying for, I think, anyway.
I don't think it's people talk about one fight at a time, which is very important. But I always think you've got to have a plan and plan ahead a little bit and look to who we're going to be fighting next. But I think what can happen is complacency here, thinking of how easy, particularly the second fight was with Derek Chisora. That could be a problem for him. But a really interesting statistic, and I didn't know this until we started to work on this fight. This is Derek Chisora's second world title fight. That's it.
A 10.5-year gap.
Unbelievable.
It's scandalous. When you think about some of the guys that have had 2 and 3 fights, or certainly had chances. I once did, before he fought Pulev, I did an awful lot of work, and I'm going to find the sheet for tomorrow night when we're on BT, the three of us. Unfortunately, I can't use it right now on 5 Live, but sorry about that. But I'm going to find the sheet. I did a thing about all the men who have fought for a world title since Derek fought Vitali, and I swear, there's 15 men in there, wouldn't even be allowed, to paraphrase Rocky Marciano, to tie up Derek's bootlaces. He never got a look in.
But at the same time, you're right, Carl, he's only fought Vitaly Klitschko in a world title fight, but he's fought 5 fighters, 4 or 5, that have actually been a world champion at some stage. Haye, Parker, Usyk, and obviously Tyson Fury.
Pulev as well, was he a world champion?
No, Pulev was a world champion. He had a fight against Josh.
Delete that.
But so we don't edit that, Carl, don't worry. That's Carl Frampton who said that. By the way, there was such a dilemma coming in here today with clothing. I know Richard's got a brand new coat. Carl's got some new trousers. But Carl had an unfortunate mix-up, and he had to ask the makeup woman how he should come on set, whether he should wear a jumper or just a shirt with a jacket. And I'm sitting there, fully self-contained. I've got my tube pass. I've got a couple of sandwiches from Woolies. Okay, I've got matching socks and clean underpants, always. And I've got no specials, and all of you got specials. Anyway, here's an interesting point. You mentioned there about the world title fight. But we all forget the 2 world title fights that Derek didn't have, that he should have had with Vladimir Klitschko. When Vladimir pulled out 48 hours before with a stomach bug, and I was doing my BBC London show then, and Derek told me, he said, Bunsey, he won't fight me. He won't fight me.
They didn't fancy it, Steve.
I said, Derek, you're fighting in 48 hours. He said, take it from me, Steve, he'll pull out. And he did. And then the following year, with about 2 weeks' notice, he pulled out again.
Did you tell me that story? Was it Manny Stewart didn't fancy this fight?
Didn't fancy it, mate.
And I believe it, completely believe
Manny
it.
Stewart for 5 Live, and I asked him, I said, what about the Derek? And he said, and I won't do his accent because I get in trouble for accents. he said, Derek, he said, Del Boy. He said, Del Boy's all wrong for my man. All wrong for my man. Yeah. Now, that's not me inventing it. I've got no reason to invent it. That's true. Del Boy's all
too much
wrong
of a threat.
For my man.
He was too much of a threat for Klitschko.
Now, the one thing we may be overlooking, and we're talking about what Tyson might do or might not do, is that he does play to a crowd. He does love a crowd. Yeah. And he's got a monstrously captive audience there tomorrow night who are out, not necessarily for the fight, that's not a slight on Derek, but they're out for the event. They're out for Tyson Fury. Could that in any way influence him to do what might be silly and get too involved too early?
Yes, I think, Steve, I think he loves to play to the crowd and he wants to. I think it's important now for Tyson Fury to entertain people in his contest. That's what he wants to do. And the way that he's got to entertain in this fight, for me, is stand toe-to-toe. He is going to take risks. But, Steve, if the tide turns, if Chisora's getting on top, don't be surprised that he turns back southpaw and he makes it really awkward again. Because at the end of the day, it's all about winning. It's keeping that O and making sure that he wins. He wants to entertain, but don't be surprised if he changes tactics if it's not going his way.
Part of the reason why he's got this rapport and massive appeal globally with the people is how he fights. Only part of the reason, but that is part of it. And it's because he's way more aggressive. Fury, pre-Klitschko and stuff, he stunk the place out loads of times. And he, I remember them giving tickets away when he was fighting in the King's Hall and in Belfast. It was mad. We forget that, but he's a different type of person now. Isn't he? Different animal, and the people love him partly because of how he fights.
No, listen, partly because of the Wilder, and as we were talking about earlier on today, it wasn't just the Wilder fight. It's that he accepted that Wilder challenge in 2018 when he wasn't ready, when his head was barely straight, when he was still carrying too much weight. And Anthony Joshua was unbeaten world champion at the time. And he was unbeaten world champion, Deontay Wilder, at the time. And they'd been world champions for a few years together. And they couldn't agree terms for the most obvious fight in heavyweight boxing history. And then suddenly, overnight, in August, you remember we were out in Belfast. You remember? Of course you do. You're involved, as they say in the trade.
It's on my undercard, remember?
Yeah, it was on your undercard, I know, yeah. And by the way, it was your undercard. And it switched like that. The fight was made in a nanosecond. Yeah. It went from a rumour to a fact in 12 hours. I've never known a big fight fall into bed. And suddenly the British public had this guy, this alternative guy, Tyson, who's been around a while, and he was quite famous because there was that fallout about sports personality and the way he was interviewed by Gary Lineker on the night. And suddenly he's accepted a fight that the national hero, the idol, AJ didn't want. That was the narrative. Probably not true, but hey-ho. And then suddenly we get to LA. We were there, boys. Well, you weren't there, were you?
I was there.
No. Didn't let me go.
Sorry, Carl, sorry. I would have given you clothing tips as well in LA. I become sort of, a bit sartorial there. So, but Richie, you and I were there.
Yeah.
And we were 4 feet away from the ring, touching the ring.
I was in Lennox. I was sitting with Lennox up in presentation.
I had my hand on the rope when he went down in that 12th round, and I am telling you, that was spiritual. I get goosebumps thinking about
absolutely.
it. And so taking the fight with Wilder, the fights with Wilder, at that particular moment in that 12th round, that made the boy. That made it, man.
That particular moment, it has made him, and the people love him. That is like, you put that in a Rocky movie, and it's too far-fetched. What happened? And he was asleep on his back. Yeah. It was
without a doubt.
In the 12th round. Yeah. Unbelievable.
But the thing is as well, Steve, looking back now in hindsight, you realise how he's performed since then. That was probably a 65-70% Tyson Fury, to be quite honest. And for me, he still won the fight. He was carrying a lot of flab. He was still on the comeback trail. To accept a fight against the biggest puncher in boxing history in Deontay Wilder at the time, I mean, it was an incredible performance.
And I actually think that the 2 fights he had next year, Big Tom Schwartz, the German, and Otto Wallin, the Swede, those were necessary rounds. Even though one was a blowout, one was hard.
Still coming back.
That was when he was still getting it. Without those 2 fights, if he fights, in my opinion, if he fights Wilder in a rematch in the February or the March of 2019, he might have won, but there's no guarantee. Yeah. But once he gets in 2020, with those people behind him, he's a different beast.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was on the comeback trail in that fight. But now, looking back, Steve, now, he is a changed fighter. Whether he can move, Carl's talking about whether he can move up on his feet. We'll find that out, I think, in this fight. But I do believe it's going to be toe-to-toe early on. And it's going to be exciting because I think if it's not toe-to-toe, it won't be exciting. And it's more important for Tyson Fury to entertain these days.
You really think
he wants to please the people?
You both believe that?
Yeah, I believe he wants to please the people.
You weren't just saying that to please David earlier.
Not genuine. He's got this adulation of the people. Yeah. Not all because of it, but partly because of this aggressive style that he's got. And he likes it. He likes the attention he's getting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he loves the fact that he is now loved. And at one stage in his career, he wasn't. He was a really disliked man. They love him now.
And he's so exciting as an aggressive fighter. I mean, we know he can box on his back foot, but going forward, he is very, very capable and exciting as he's going forward, Steve.
Well, I tell you what, I'm not shocked because we've started to look into reasons why he's fighting this way now as opposed to the way that would make more sense. But You're filling me with joy that we are going to see 180 crazy seconds there tomorrow, which is absolutely beautiful. I'm delighted, the two of you. You've instilled me with a belief that we're going to get something very special.
The reason why I believe it, Steve, I think mentally Tyson knows in his mind he'll win this fight. But it's how he does it and how he entertains and how he comes over to the public. I think that's really goes through his mind. That's probably more important to him. That he not only wins the fight, but he wins it in style and he pleases people doing it.
And I'll tell you what, and I'll throw in there, when he beat Otto Val in 12 rounds and he had that awful cut, he was really disappointed at the end. I was interviewing him, Frank Warren, stone-faced, Bob Arum, stone-faced, Tyson Fury, stone-faced, Ben Davison in the background. In London, Gypsy Johnny Fury, the dad, saying, he's got to sack them, he's got to get rid of all of them. Oh, they're going to ruin my son, they're going to ruin my boy. Which they did. He did get rid of them, and Tyson wasn't right that night. So he wasn't happy that night. So who knows? Perhaps it's going to happen. Carl, it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight keeping you here to talk. You've got some new clothes for the show, which is fantastic. And you and the commentator, Darren Fletcher, the commentator, has got some new warm clothing. Richard's got some new warm clothing. You're out in a 5-star steakhouse this evening. All I could say to the two of you is enjoy it tonight, because tomorrow night I think we might get something special for a good few rounds.
I certainly hope so, Steve, and I really believe we will.
Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure and a delight, boys. Whilst Carl and Richie walk away and go and get ready for their steaks, I've come over and had a chat with David. David, we've now all come round to your way of thinking. We now think that the Gypsy King has to do it in the first or the second round. And we've actually decided that he can no longer dance. I'm being only mildly facetious, but we're kind of believing it. You've got a big grin on your face.
Listen, if Tyson Fury wants to go toe-to-toe and go to war with someone whose nickname is War Chisora, we're all in for a hell of a treat. We really are, because, you know, I've seen Tyson Fury up close, up front. What he did to Deontay Wilder in that second fight,
which none of us believed, did we? Let's get it right.
He said it all fight.
You and I were ringside.
I was thinking, whatever, you're going to do what you always do, long-range boxer. Oh no, he came and went toe-to-toe. It was so impressive. It shocked Deontay Wilder, because he's not used to being in that fight. No one comes at Deontay Wilder. They're normally trying to stay away from his power. But Derek Chisora, he only can fight that way. He can only fight in the pocket. He can only swing his punches. He doesn't look what he's doing a lot of the time. He's just letting his hands go. Doing that against Tyson Fury, I don't know how it works out. If Tyson Fury comes into his zone, if he comes into the battleground and just wants to trade punches, giving away all of his natural advantages, his height, his reach, his footwork, all that slipping punches. It's hard to slip punches when someone's head's against your head, on your chest. Yeah. So I think it's the best thing that's happened to this fight promotion, is hearing that Tyson Fury is going to go out there on the first bell. And I applaud the crowd to boo any time any fighter steps back to jab. No, this is if they've shaken, they've spat in each other's hands and shook it, that from the first round they're going to go out and go toe-to-toe until one of them drops.
But surely, Dave, Sugar Hill in the corner, if he does
he's
do
going
that
to be pulling out his hair. He really is. He's not going to like that one bit.
So you've got a bit of sympathy for Sugar Hill in the corner.
I've got sympathy
doing the wrong thing. But you're saying a deal's a deal.
The deal's a deal.
A shake's a shake between two men who both consider themselves warriors, and they've got to do the business.
Tyson Fury has proven on 2 occasions that he can outbox him. He boxed him orthodox the first time, won every round, boxed him southpaw in an unnatural stance for him. He also beat him, won every round, then got him to, and stopped Derek in the last round, got his corner to throw in the towel. Broke his heart. So we don't need to see that again. They weren't that entertaining fights.
No, they weren't, but
how about he comes out and makes up for those two and gets rid of Derek Chisora in a quicker time than I got rid of him at 5 rounds 10 years ago. Why don't you try it and go out there and do that?
See, your fight with him, I know you win in the end, but that's a struggle. That's a proper fight.
That's because I said I was going to.
That's one of the forgotten fights.
I said I was going to knock him out within 5 rounds, and that's exactly what I went out. I set myself out to do. The pace had to be high. I worked on different things, but I had the intention of doing that. Hopefully Tyson Fury has the intention to do that, because if he does, it'll be way more exciting than him just having a sparring session with his friend.
And I've got to ask you this. I asked the boys earlier. Obviously, there's all sorts of big fights lined up. In fact, some of those guys will be at ringside. Usyk will be at ringside. Big Joe Joyce, who's up on the stage here, will be at ringside. AJ will be watching. Is there any danger? Can you imagine taking your eye off the prize? I mean, you know...
He's so professional. Both guys are professional. He's been there. He hasn't got this. He's not unbeaten You know, he had those close fights against John McDermott back in the day where...
But he was drinking the night before, he
now
hadn't
he's
trained, and that's all facts,
he's not,
you know?
now he's not. Those are lessons are learned at those stages.
Yeah.
You know, now when he fights these tricky customers here and there, the Steve Cunnings of the world who he expected just to bowl through. Next thing you know, he's on the seat of his pants. So he's been there, he's learned all his lessons, and he definitely won't overestimate or underestimate.
Now, Dave, I've got to ask you this final question. I really appreciate your time because you've been mobbed, and I've got to ask you this. Do you regret the fact now that you didn't have one of those 2 fights with Tyson all those years ago? Because I've never asked you that. Because people say you're a Tyson hater. You know, his dad wants to do a bare knuckle fight with you and a swimming race with you and play chess with you and cook with you, anything he can competitively. But do you regret not having that fight?
It's nothing really to regret because there's nothing I could have done about it.
Sure.
You know, I had
would you have liked to have had it?
I would have loved to. And if I was ever going to have fought him, I was going to fight him at the best possible time in his career for me.
Yeah.
At that time.
Not for him, but for you.
Not for him, but for me.
That's
so
brilliant.
in 2013, I think it was scheduled for, you know, he was just coming off a real poor performance against Steve Cunningham where he got put on the seat of his pants.
Properly hurt as well. He was gone for 4 rounds.
He hadn't shown any of that Tyson Fury hero stuff he's shown of late. I was a favourite going into that fight, quite a big favourite going into that fight. And I understood at the time that he's a tricky guy. I trained real hard for it. I got Deontay Wilder over the sparring, Marius.
I've seen the sessions.
So I really took it seriously. And one of those things, fate decided it wasn't meant to be, unfortunately, because it would have been a nice scalp, that one, as years
because you would have got him then. So that would have been a good time.
It would have been a similar. I'd have considered it the same sort of thing that when Mayweather beat Canelo.
Bingo.
He got him at the right time, but unfortunately my body didn't hold up, and it was the end.
You know what, Dave? This is the end here as well. The Islington Design Centre's now empty. We've done our stuff. Richie Woodall and the boys are waving to us. Hold on, boys, hold on. I'll shout to them. Dave, it's been a pleasure.
Likewise,
see you tomorrow night at ringside. Thanks, Dave. Do you want to walk out? Just walk out if you like. Yeah. So that's a wrap, as they say in the trade, from the weigh-in. We've got the weights. I'll just read them to you again. Tyson Fury will be 19 stone 2, which is 4 pounds heavier than he was when he knocked out the Dillian White. And Derek Del Boy Chisora will be 18 stone 8, which is 2 pounds heavier than when he beat Kubrat Pulev earlier this year. We've heard from Carl Frampton, we've heard from Richie Woodall, and there we heard from David Haye. And it all seems to be leading to the fact that we might get something very lively, like Dave promised. Tyson Fury has spat in his palm and shaken hands, and in traveller culture, that's a solid deal, my friend. That's better than a written contract. You've been listening to me, Steve Bunce. This has been 5 Live Boxing. Thanks very much.
Let's get ready to rumble!
5 Live Boxing.